And I'm going to just talk a little bit more because Meta does a lot of things beyond the social media that you're familiar with. Meta is one of the founding and steering members of the Overture Maps Foundation. And Jennings there has worked within Meta to build full stack data analysis streams that explore the history, evolution of the map of Overture and the rapidly growing community that collectively maintains the largest free and open geographic database in the world. So at this point, I'm going to pass things over to Jennings for his presentation.
All right. All right, there's my screen. Happy to be here today to demo Fused. So I'll start off here. The Overture Maps Foundation, this is our documentation webpage. Overture Maps Foundation produces monthly data releases with billions of features, including buildings, roads, places, administrative boundaries, addresses, land cover, and more. With each release, Overture combines the best open data sources with data from OpenStreetMap, Microsoft, TomTom, Esri, Open Addresses, Google Open Buildings, and more. A complete list of data sources can be found here in our documentation as well. Each month, these releases are published in GeoParquet and made available on both AWS S3 and Azure Blob Storage. And the data sets are also ingested by Fused, and that's what I'm going to demo here. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So here is our Fused workbench. And this first UDF I'm going to demo shows all of the Overture buildings. And Overture Buildings is a global data set. If we zoom out here, we can see global coverage. What we're actually visualizing each of these boxes is the bounding box of the row groups of the GeoParquet files. So Fused is reading these directly from the GeoParquet data and making it available to us right here in the workbench. And so we can kind of see how the data is spatially partitioned, and we get a nice kind of density map overview. And then as we zoom in, and you can see that here on the left, this code, we have this module that's using some of these Fused utilities, in this case, to read the data directly off of source.coop. And we're reading the latest release, which is the September release, and specifically the buildings theme. Overture Buildings, 2.3, almost 2.4 billion buildings globally. And now as we zoom in, and we get past a certain, there we go, past a certain level, these bounding boxes will disappear. And we start to actually see the individual buildings. And we see the tooltip here. And we're seeing the actual, here's the metadata that we're pulling from Overture Maps, including the primary source of the buildings and the height. And as you can see, there's some OpenStreetMap buildings, Microsoft ML buildings. We can take this one step further. The Overture Buildings conflation takes OpenStreetMap data at the top, then Esri community data sets, and then a mixture of Google Open Buildings and Microsoft ML buildings. And we want to do a little bit better visualization here to see what that conflation might look like. So we can go over to the visualization tab, and I have something I will paste in here. And in this case, we're just changing this get fill color, and we're also extruding the data based on the height property. And then we're looking at that actual primary data source, which we're pulling directly out of the data frame. And now we are looking in the San Diego area. And we can go ahead and tilt it. And it's Fused is going to load all those buildings and color them by the actual primary source. I'll let that load for a second here. And here we go. So now we can see this kind of nice mixture of, in this case, we have some Esri community maps data, as well as, there we go, primary source in here in this kind of yellow color is the Esri community maps data. And then we see OpenStreetMap. And then as we move further south here, we see how our building conflation algorithm is choosing different Microsoft ML buildings and Google Open buildings based on the different confidence levels that are provided by these source data sets. So this has been a really powerful way to visualize Overture data directly from the GeoParquet without having to first tile the data or otherwise download it and process it. We are pulling it live directly off of, in this case, source.coop through the Fused interface into the workbench, and we're able to work with that data and style it. One more thing we can do with Overture data here is, here's this next one I'll show, is these are now all the Overture buildings again. And we take this bounding box. This is the example that we showed in the blog post that you can see on the Fuse documentation. And there's the editor. And we're going out and querying the national structures inventory and combining it, that is a point per building, and combining that, doing a spatial join on the Overture geometry. And in this case, you can see here, we have the ID for this building. This is the Global Entity Reference System ID from Overture, so the unique stable ID for that building. And we're joining it point in polygon to the national structures inventory. And in this case, you can see this bottom field here, num story is 1. That's coming from the structure inventory. And so this building is showing up as white here because it doesn't have a height attribute from Overture. And over here, these buildings that are different colors are showing that they are bringing in the height. So we can then go ahead and use that num story attribute from the National Spatial Index to fill in height data where we don't have it for Overture. And just like that, all those buildings now have a height value. And so this is one way that we're actually joining another data set that we're going out and requesting data from the National Structure Inventory and joining that to the Overture data set. Again, all of this happening on the fly. And that's really, really powerful. And then that can also be made available under, if we go to settings, you can see this actually becomes a tile endpoint. And here's an example where we're actually loading that tile endpoint directly into a map here, in this case, running the Fused app builder. And this is more information on this is also available in that blog post that we put together with Fused. So that's a quick overview of how we're using Fuse to help visualize our data sets within the Overture Maps Foundation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennings. Just a quick question I have when I was aware of this work. I mean, 2.4 billion buildings is pretty massive, and I assume there are like some errors in the source data. Are you finding this type of rapid visualization allowing you to discover any artifacts that were previously unknown about the source?
Absolutely. It has been super helpful. What I love about this one in particular is we can zoom in anywhere in the world and pull this. I mean, when we've been running the conflation, we're obviously looking at much smaller areas when we're doing kind of spot checking and testing on the data that we're looking at. But with Fuse, we're able to just zoom in anywhere and immediately, now I'm really testing the live demo here, but immediately see how our conflation algorithms are working and processing these data. So between Microsoft and Google Open Buildings, and we've found many, many artifacts and been able to kind of inspect different quality levels in the data and make decisions about how we prioritize our ranking.
Excellent. Well, thank you. We're going to switch over now to our second presentation, and